Hi dancers. So today we're going to start to learn a bit about the concept of spiral in Martha Graham's technique. She basically had three major principles in her work, which were contraction and release, which is based on breathing, and then the concept of spiral, which was based on nature, and all the things that grow in a spiral. If you look at DNA, it's a spiral. The way that a tree grows is actually in a spiral. That's why it has the rings in the wood. Hair grows in a spiral. So there's this theme in nature of spiral being a thing that grows. And she wanted to use that in her dance technique. And spiraling is also a natural movement of the spine, right? Either the spine kind of curves and stretches, or it bends side to side. She doesn't have so much of that in her work, or it has the twisting action. So the spiraling is a twisting action. And as with all things in Martha Graham's technique, it begins in the pelvis. So when you're taking a spiral, you're not just moving your shoulders back and forth, right? Or even just moving your rib cage back and forth. You're actually starting from the hip. So if everyone can just take their legs out to like a small second position, and just do this little sort of salsa that I'm doing here with my hips, moving back and forth, so that you're really feeling that the hip bone is actually moving. It's not just the upper body moving. You see the difference? So we're going to be doing some things with the legs crossed, but their hip is going to be initiating instead of just the rib cage and torso. So the first thing that you want to do if you're new to Martha Graham's technique and you're new to the spiral concept is just to experiment with moving the hips back and forth, and feel the difference between that and moving from the rib cage or moving from the shoulders. Because the rib cage and the shoulders are only moving responsively. They're not initiating any movement in the spiral. So you start with the left leg forward. Typically this is done with the pointed feet, but for today we're going to just do it with relaxed legs because I want you to really just focus on the pelvis movement. And you're going to take your arms out. This is a codified shape that the fingertips are elongated and the wrists are balanced on the knees, right? If you're a little tighter in the hips and your knees are up here, it doesn't matter. Or if you're all the way down on the floor, you just want to have sit bones anchored and wrists balancing on the knees and elongating through the fingertips, not just relaxed. So the spiral starts in the hip and we're going to pull the right hip back. It pulls back and then the rest of the body responds, and you're going to look over the opposite shoulder. This is the part that feels a little counterintuitive because sometimes you want to go like this, right? Because you feel like, well, I'm moving this way, naturally my head goes that way. But your head for Graham actually goes in opposition. So you start with the pelvis, your body is going to move, your head is going this way. This is your next checkpoint, is this shoulder. This shoulder should not be rotating in. Sometimes it feels like, oh, I can get a deeper spiral this way. No, you want to keep the shoulders absolutely even. And then you come back to the center, pelvis, rib cage, torso, and you center the body. We'll take that to the other side. Left hip pulls back, the left side of the ribs, the left shoulder, the head goes in opposition. This right shoulder is not rotated in, it's elongated, and we come back, pelvis, middle back, chest, and back to the center. Okay, so let's just take that 4 times. 6, 7, and 8. And a hip, waist, chest, and head, and a hip, waist, chest, and head, and a hip, waist, chest, and head, a hip, waist, chest, again, and a hip, waist, chest, and head, and a hip, waist, chest, and head, and a hip, waist, chest, and head, and a hip, waist, chest, and head. And you should feel your spine starting to warm up. The other concept with the Graham spiral is the barber pole. If anyone has seen the pole where the spiral goes around, the blue and red kind of circles in the pole. And the idea of the barber pole is that when you are moving in your spiral, you're on your axis. The top and the bottom are still lined up. You're not doing any type of leaning or lateral side stretching. So if you can see yourself, you can find a mirror or use your camera, right? You should be able to take the biggest twist possible without any type of hunching or bending either direction in the upper body. That part is very important. So another preparation that I like to do from the Graham technique is that you use the bow and arrow image, and you take your spiral, and this helps if you get confused about the head because you're looking where you're shooting, and you want to have that stretching feeling of the two ends reaching far away from each other so that this is not collapsed, this is not collapsed, right? You're not bending to the side. You're pulling and stretching through the chest. So let's take the right leg in front for this one, and we'll go to the right side with the bow and arrow concept, starting deep in the pelvis. And hip, waist, chest, and head, and a hip. Waist, chest, and head, and a hip. Waist looking strong over the hand. Hip, waist, chest, and head. Again, a hip. Waist, chest, and head, and a hip. Waist, chest, and head, and a hip. Waist, chest, and head, and a hip. Waist, chest, and head. Good. Third concept that we'll investigate is adding the contraction. So let's go back to the left leg in front. And I'm going to make it dancer's choice if you want to just keep the legs relaxed or if you want to point the feet and have that nice alignment there. So the full exercise from the contraction, you start low in the contraction with a nice wide back, and you're going to spiral and start your release at the same time, kind of like a rolling up. And then you center with a fully stretched spine, and then you contract. Okay, so this is normally done on threes. 1, 2, 3, center 1, 2, contract 3. 1, 2, 3, center 1, 2, contract 3. So we'll take the full series with the contraction 4 times, right and left. It's actually starting to the left. So left leg is in front, and we contract 2, 3, and a up. 2, 3, and a 1. 2, contract 3, and a spiral. 2, 3, center 1. 2, contract 3, and a spiral. 2, 3, and a center. 2, contract 3, and a spiral. 2, 3, and a center. 2, contract 3. Good. Stretch up. Stretch forward over the legs. And you can just take a nice little hamstring stretch, release the hips, okay? And then when you get to the next combination, standing, the tendu combination, you're going to apply those same concepts of spiral when we do the later combination.